Hi, my name is Whitney Kell, and I want to welcome you to Chatting with Cheskin. Today we are excited to bring to you Dr. Larry Cheskin. With over 30 years of background in research in obesity, he is the founder of the Johns Hopkins Weight Management Center. He also has been involved in peer-reviewed publications, published over 200 peer-reviewed journal articles, and many, many clinical trials. I would say Dr. Cheskin is an expert in the field of obesity, and we are really excited to share his knowledge and wisdom regarding a few studies that he's done. And I'm going to turn it over to my coach, Greg Rex, and welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Whitney. And thanks, Dr. Cheskin, for being here today. I know there's a lot of questions people have, a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation out there about obesity and nutrition and all the things. I want to start with kind of a big picture question about the consequences and the cost of obesity. And when I'm talking about the cost of obesity, I'm not just talking about the financial cost. I'm talking about the emotional, the human cost, the quality of life, the financial, sure, the career impact, the family impact. And I know that you've been able to see this firsthand in your practice over the 30-some years and seeing the trends and the changes in the science and the data. So let's start with what are some of the critical personal impacts to that individual, and then we'll kind of move through the scale to the society and to the larger scale.
Absolutely, and thank you for inviting me to share my experience with the listeners.
So tell me about, obviously there's a health issue on the personal level. What other impacts are there for the individual?
Yes, and it starts, of course, with the individual level, because no one would be as committed to doing something about the problem if it didn't have these individual impacts first and foremost. The other impacts are really a consequence and a reflection of those individual impacts. So as you mentioned, the first individual impact is that, unfortunately, it does have rather marked health consequences. And unfortunately, we can't tell with every individual exactly what kind of or how much of a health impact it's going to have. These are population studies and population averages that tell us if you're obese, you're more likely to have diabetes, high blood pressure, shorten your lifespan, etc. But I can't tell you if you, Greg, if you gain weight, what it's going to do to you. I can just say, on average, it'll make you more likely to get diabetes, etc. So we're guided and motivated in part by what it does to us. If you're, a 95-year-old cigarette smoker, well, you've got less incentive to quit smoking because you made it to 95. It didn't seem to do you any great harm. Well, you cough a little bit, but clearly if it was going to kill you, it would have killed you already. And the same thing is true of obesity. If you've got diabetes and you're injecting yourself with insulin 3 times a day, that's a different level of concern and a different level of motivation than if somebody just tells you, oh, you have a higher risk of getting diabetes, you really should lose weight. On the other hand, if you don't like the way you feel at your energy level, even though you're not injecting yourself with insulin 3 times a day, that could be more motivating than any potential health consequences. So that's the personal impact, and it varies a great deal between individuals. One way that we measure this is called health-related quality of life. So quality of life has a lot of things that go into it, obviously, and some of it is how we interpret our lives. We all know people who seem to have really pretty difficult lives and yet are happy. So you have to always be putting things into perspective. But if you ask people a set of questions about how healthy they feel they are and what they feel they can do and what their limitations are, you can put together something we call health-related quality of life. And clearly, every study shows that with obesity, the more severe, the lower the health-related quality of life. Financial, this is more a societal impact than an inherent, ability to be financially secure. There are prejudices in our society. And we know, for instance, that even white male middle managers, how likely are they to be promoted to upper management? Well, it depends what their body mass index is to some extent, how likely they are to be promoted. Is that because if you're heavier, you're less competent? Highly unlikely that that's the case. You may be less confident. People may look at you differently and say, he doesn't look like our CEO should look, but it's clearly a societal prejudice that can impact that. You can never be too rich or too thin, and the opposite is true also when you're heavy. Very often that has a negative financial consequence.
And isn't it also true, Larry, that one of the biggest reasons that people have financial difficulty, bankruptcies, et cetera, is these medical bills that are unexpected. And if they're high risk candidates because of their obesity, their chances of getting insurance is more expensive. It just really snowballs. And then, as you mentioned, there's a social impact thing, that the circle around them, the individual has a financial, emotional, and health impact. But there's also a health and financial and emotional impact on their closest friends and family. Tell us a little about the social network study that was done back in the JAMA back a few years ago.
Yes, it is very fascinating, I think, that, and the quick and dirty way to say it is, you look like your neighbors. So basically, the people we spend time with, family, friends, contacts, even work colleagues, we start to share habits, and we tend to look like them. Because if the people you're spending your time with don't pay attention to their diet and are not physically active, well, that gives you that much more disincentive to be health conscious yourself. So when you look at these nests of people, you will find that the closer the contact and the relationship, the more likely they are to share things like what their body mass index is and what their health habits are. And does that mean you find a new group of friends? Well, sometimes that might be necessary, but most of the time just being more aware of it and not necessarily emulating the bad habits of those closest to you is what you need to do.
Yeah, and we consciously help our clients not only plug into healthy communities where they're going to have like-minded people that are going to pass on those healthy habits, but we also help them be a role model for their family so that they can bring some healthy habits into their smaller communities. But it goes even beyond that. It goes to almost like a corporate level, an economic level, national level. The implications for obesity and the strain it puts on our healthcare system, the strain it puts on our workforce, the strain it puts on our military, our services, the firefighters and police. We're losing people that can't qualify to be in service because they can't control their weight. Tell us a little bit about what you're noticing there.
And I should say it's both what I'm noticing, and there are a variety of theoretical considerations. The most prevalent, most people have never heard of this, but it's very common to use the term social ecological model of health behavior. And that's the most commonly cited theory of health behavior and health behavior change. So there are these sort of concentric circles. There's you within yourself, that's the first level. And then there's your interactions with people around you. And then there's your larger social groups of, I'm part of this corporation, or I'm part of this military unit, or I'm part of this extended family, and that influences what I do. And even beyond that, there is, what's in my neighborhood. It's a food desert, and I can't get healthy food that easily. That's going to influence how I behave. And there is another level of government policies. It's cheaper to buy, a bag of potato chips than it is to buy fresh fruit in the winter. Therefore, that pushes me in the wrong direction as far as what I'm eating. So there are these levels of influence on our behaviors that you don't need to become an expert in behavior theories, but it's important, I think, to recognize that, yes, it's all theoretically within our individual control, but there are major outside influences in these sort of concentric layers of influence that, if you're aware of, you can be more able to control them or ignore them when appropriate.
So in closing, if we have this information, we know that there's this ripple effect. There's the individual, there's the small concentric family, the small unit, there's the bigger social influences, all the way up to government, your neighborhood, all those different influences. What are the best recommendations? What are we seeing that can go against this obesogenic kind of trend, this natural tendency to society to pull people towards obesity? What are the best practices viewers can focus on?
Well, and let me start to answer that by throwing another somewhat technical term at you, and that is to use a systems approach. So talking about the entire system instead of limiting our discussion. And there's great value to also focusing on the individual level behaviors. If you just assume the system is going to take care of it, you're mistaken. You need to do some things. On the other hand, if you just look at individual behaviors, then you're going to fail to recognize the pervasive influence of the whole system. So that, you know, in a poor neighborhood that doesn't have food available that's healthful, then, you know, it makes it a lot harder, and you need to look at that whole social stratum and how you can help that community, and then the individuals have an easier time of changing their habits. So I guess in summary, the best way to approach this is to recognize that, yes, you have individual responsibility for what you put in your mouth and what you do with your day, but that is influenced by a whole set of factors outside of you that you must understand and learn how to work with.
That's beautiful. And that's one of the reasons we really focus on our coaching program on holistic approaches, a whole holistic system approach that includes all these factors. Very, very insightful. Thank you, Dr. Cheskin. Back to you, Whitney.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Cheskin. That was chock full. I'm so excited and grateful that we have the opportunity to do these Cheskin Chats. Please stay tuned, everyone who joined us. There's more to come, and contact the person who posted this video or that sent this to you if you'd like more information. Look forward to our next one. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.